Most people only pay attention to the final product of a successful entrepreneur. They say things like, I can never be like them, or they got lucky. What most don't see is what they've overcome. All the struggles, the daily rejections, the heartaches, the betrayals, the rumors, the criticism, the empty bank account, and all those lonely nights while trying to make their vision a reality. You see, the only difference between the one who quits and the one who doesn't is that they showed up every day. They worked hard every day. They hustled every day. They learned from a proven mentor every day. They improved every day. They did all this even though they felt like quitting every day. And eventually, they became who they are today.
Oh, Dakota, I apologize. I failed on my preparation. I accidentally deleted the other video I was going to show. So that's all right. It's better to have you live and in person and ready to go. So Dakota, thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks for providing that little video, a little bit of inspiration. I call it maybe a little bit of our opening prayer to get going, you know? And so appreciate you being on, buddy.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here.
So I want to introduce you a little bit before we start. Some of you out there watching or that will watch maybe don't know Dakota. A lot of you obviously already do know Dakota. But my first recollection of Dakota was, man, I don't know, Dakota, when was it when you did that Slaria, your first presentation? You were nervous as can be. Randall had you come speak. That was like a couple years ago, right? 2 or 3 years, like 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's been about 2 years now. I remember I sweat through my shirt in front of everybody, so that was kind of embarrassing. But
yeah, so as you get to know Dakota today, you'll realize he is who he is, right? He wears his passion on his sleeve. A lot of times the paint and sweat equity on his sleeve and on his shoes and on his pants. And I remember Dakota up there, and I'm thinking, who is this guy? He looks like he's about 15 years old. And he's got quite a cool story. So I'm hoping he tells us a little bit about this as we kind of get into the call. But Dakota, and Dakota, you know, your last name is scary because I want to say like Worrell or Worrell, but it's Worrell, right?
Worrell. Yep.
Worrell. Okay, cool. Dakota Worrell is an established multifamily real estate investor. Since founding DW Investors LLC in 2015 with only $419, he's remodeled over 100 units himself and currently owns 103 highly performing apartments. 103 doors, I'm assuming. A master of seller financing, Dakota became a millionaire at the age of 21 and now enjoys teaching and mentoring new investors through DW Education. So we're going to talk today about a bunch of different stuff, but what I hope everyone comes away with from the end of the call, like normally with these calls, is one action item that you can take and implement and take action on. So one idea, one aha, one strategy, one thought, whatever it is, or one little thing to motivate you to push you to action and take that next step, whether it's your first step or your next step, right? And I've been wanting Dakota on since March when I started doing these calls because, man, talk about a kid taking action and a man taking action from a very young age. And so anyway, Dakota, I'm talking too much. I want you, if you're okay with it, kind of go back in time a little bit and just let's tell your story for 5 minutes or so about where you came from and how you got to your first deal. And I know you've told me privately, hopefully you're okay talking about it, that you experienced a lot in between, you know, maybe like your teenage years to your first deal that a lot of us maybe don't experience, which probably helped get you on the curve of like, how do I be successful sooner than later?
Sure. Summing up my life in 5 minutes. So I I really began my journey probably when I was 15. I really wanted to be an adult at that point in my life, and the rest of the world still viewed me as a minor and adolescent. And I really butted heads with my parents, right? Like a lot of people do, but I really butted heads with my parents. And my parents actually helped me through the emancipation process. They were like, you think you can do it better? You want independence? Fine, we're not going to hold you back. So they actually helped me through the emancipation process. Emancipated myself at 16. We lived in Hawaii at the time. There was no future for me in Hawaii. Minimum wage at that time hadn't even been raised to $10 an hour there. So we picked up and went to Florida. And this is the funny part. Like, as I look back and reflect, my parents, I really understand. My parents were absolute saints, especially with all the crappy stuff I was doing in the background and how difficult I was being. But I was so upset at them at the time, but they went above and beyond. They actually helped me find my first apartment, helped me sign a lease on it, gave me some basic furniture. I think they paid my first, last, and security deposit for me. And then they dropped me there and they said, you're on your own, right? You have 30 days to find a job.
And how old are you again?
I was 16. Like, I just barely turned 16. So I'm still in high school.
Wow.
I've been emancipated, which is supposed to make you an adult, but it doesn't really matter. Like, nobody was signing leases to a 16-year-old kid.
So wait, what does that mean? I thought maybe you were just talking about, like, in theory, emancipated, but did they legally?
Yeah, legally emancipated. It was a big process.
Wow. Okay. All right. So
my parents' whole game plan with this, talking back, was best case scenario, I succeed and they're proud of me and they're happy for me. But worst case scenario, I learn how hard the world is and maybe learn some respect and have to come back and say, Mom, Dad, you were right. This is hard. This sucks.
Wow. Okay. I did not pick up on that the first time you told your story. Okay. So you're in Florida now in your own apartment, 16 years old, no dinero, first and last months covered by your parents.
Yeah. And I was this just shows like how entitled in my mindset at the time. Like, I have really grown since that period of time. But, I was mad at them for not getting me a nicer apartment.
Yeah.
Like, this apartment was so awful. I remember the very first time I turned on the shower. I stepped in the shower, turned on the water, and it had been vacant for so long that dozens is not enough. Like 50, 60 cockroaches crawled up out of the drain as the water started going down it. I had to grab the plunger and just play whack-a-mole. This place was disgusting, but you had to remember, my parents weren't living nearby me, so where I had to live, one, had to rent to a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
Two, had to access to the school bus because I'm still in high school. I don't have a car. And three, had to be walking distances to where I could get my groceries and everything else, right? So I was kind of limited, and I had to be able to afford it.
Yeah.
Which was a big thing. So that apartment rented for $725 a month in Florida, no utilities included. I got 3 jobs. It took me a while to get my first one, but after I got my first one, the other 2 came easy, right? I had to volunteer. The market was hard at that time. I had to volunteer to work my first 2 weeks for free to get a job. That was after I had put in like 20 or 30 applications and nobody was calling me. And I went back in and I just went to all the same people. And I said, please, I will work my first 2 weeks for free. You know what I mean? Because here's one thing I did know for sure. I knew this in my bones. And this is there's 2 different parts of my brain that are always at war with each other. Right. But what I did know for sure is over here, I'm like entitled, mad I don't have a nicer apartment. But over here, I fully committed, I meant this down to the last drop of my soul, that I would starve to death and literally die on the streets before I went back home and gave them the satisfaction.
Yeah.
Like, it was not going to happen. I was actually prepared. And you know how you are when you're that age. Like, I was going to be homeless before I went back home. And I got hired. I got a couple more jobs. Past high school by the skin of my teeth, right? Like rent's expensive, bills are expensive. My first month, I have no concept of utility cost, right? It's Florida, so I'm running the AC, even when I'm not in the apartment, 30 days straight. My first utility bill is like $230. Wrecked me. That's a lot of work at $7.25 an hour.
Yeah.
Like I didn't realize I just pissed away like 30 hours of work.
Right.
Right. So I'm learning lessons kind of by fire here. I'm emancipated, so it's cool. I'm missing a lot of school because I'm working.
Right.
But they can't like throw me out because I'm signing my own notes.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
They can't. I'm signing myself out of school. So it's kind of interesting. Past high school, kind of by the skin of my teeth. Had no plans for college. One of my friends got a full ride up here to college, to USU, and I kind of just broke my lease and left. I didn't really.
Okay, that's how you ended up in Utah.
That's how I ended up in Utah. Now, now every time somebody breaks one of my leases and I'm all upset, I'm reminded of the time I did the same thing.
Yeah, your mind goes back to that landlord in Florida where like, I knew it, that stinking Dakota kid, oh, that's funny.
I ended up here in Utah. My friend left. It wasn't for him, and I was here alone. I didn't have really any money still because I wasn't putting money away at that time of my life. I really wasn't able to save much. But like this amazing thing happened as I'm out in the world paying my own bills, working literally 100 hours a week while I'm in school, right? As I started to actually develop a respect for my parents as men and women and as people and not just as my parents.
Yeah.
And I point that out because kind of the evolution of being able to recognize my parents as people and valuing them for what they've gone through is really the hallmark of me being wise and not just intelligent that actually has made me very successful in business. And as my relationship with my father and mother improved and I would go home to visit for holidays, and they respected me too, right? Not just as their child now, but as a man, because I've been doing this myself and I didn't ask for help.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it started, where I would ask my dad, basically, have you been doing this for 30 years? Like, is this all there is to it? Like, how did you get this house and like all of these things? Like, there's no money left
right
at the end of the check. And it sucked too, because at this point I'm enrolled in college, but I'm paying my own way. Even though I'm emancipated, since I'm not 24, they go off my dad's income, right? So there's no federal aid for me. There's no FAFSA. There's no Pell Grants. My GPA was god awful, so there's no scholarships. So I'm paying my way through college, and it's just not working. And that's kind of when my dad first broached the idea is like, well, I'm looking at the market right now and how it's recovering. And this is 2015, right? No, this is the very end of 2014.
2014.
Like, if I were you, I'd be buying a house right now. That's what I would be doing. And back then interest rates are like 4%. And he's telling me like, that's so low, right? Like his first house, he told me he got 17% on.
Yeah, right.
And, and then I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm, I'm still kind of being stubborn, right? I'm like, yeah, no, like we're not talking about buying a house, Dad. I'm trying to figure out how to save money.
Right.
He's like, yeah, you probably couldn't do it anyways.
Yeah.
And then I'm at war, humble and wise, ambitious and pride.
Yeah.
Right. And he just knows how to push that button that makes me transition over here to, okay, well, I guess I'm buying a house now because
I'm going to prove you wrong.
Absolutely. And it took me literally like 2 years after that to realize that he was doing that on purpose.
Right.
But yeah, so without knowing anything, no family, because they're all still in Hawaii. They're thousands of miles away. I'm not even telling anybody what I'm doing because I know there's a high probability I'm going to fail. And I'm very prideful.
Right.
I don't want him to know he was right. So I basically contact the first agent I see off Zillow. I go to the lender he recommends me to. I buy the first house that I look at that I think I can afford. I don't run the numbers. I barely even figure out what the payment's going to be or think about whether I can afford it.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand, this younger Dakota, his whole mentality is no price is too high, do or die, like not thinking about the future, living very much in the moment.
Just I'm getting in this no matter what, and I'm buying a house.
Yeah, because literally my primary goal is like to prove my dad wrong. And if I die trying, then, well, I'm not going to die trying. I'm going to do it because I don't know how to explain it. So we get down this road and I'm able to actually buy this first house for $419. Ironically, I got a lot of grants for being poor.
Right.
Right? Because I was under the median income of like $28,000 a year. At this time, I'm delivering pizzas for Domino's and I'm a busboy.
And how old are you? How old are you at this point? What, 19?
Barely turned 19.
19. Okay.
So the day I close, I give my dad the big fat "I told you so."
Yeah.
Right? And he's just proud of me, right? But he's like still pushing that button. He's like, if it were me, I would have been able to buy two.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's like, it's good that you got lucky though. Like, I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny how it worked out. So my whole life has been about just me fighting my ego. But you understand, 2015, things take off.
Yep.
We turned that house. We pulled the washer dryer out of the basement and we just plugged and play one of those kitchenettes that's got 2 electric stove burners, a small sink, a mini fridge. Plumbed it through the washer.
Yeah.
Drain. And we turned that basement into the downstairs and we rented the upstairs to cover the mortgage, which, at that time, of course, I took credit for. It was actually completely somebody else's idea. It wasn't even part of the plan when we bought it.
Right.
My agent walked down and as he handed me the keys on the last day, he was like, this kind of looks like its own apartment down here. And I was like, it kind of does. And that was kind of when I got my first check that month, which I rented the upstairs for $850. The mortgage was $802. It was $48 in cash flow. And I was living for free now. I'm not paying rent.
Yeah.
That was the day I knew I was a multifamily real estate investor.
That's awesome.
So I tried to condense that. That's the short story of.
No, I think that's so powerful because this will go on and continue to go on through your story up till now, right? Like whatever can be done or buried or broken at whatever age, it doesn't really matter, right? But I love how, a lot of people that I've talked to, especially on this call and just in life in general, they learn real estate from a book, right? Like it's Robert Kiyosaki's book, or it's Gary Keller's book, or it's sometimes a family business where they learned it around the kitchen table growing up, right? But you kind of, and your dad maybe prompted you a little bit to get it past that barrier of it'd be interesting if he would have challenged you to do something different, right? You probably would have done that back then instead of buying a house, but whatever it might be, right? Like open up your own pizza franchise, who knows? You'd probably own hundreds of Domino's throughout the country, right? But just that challenge of trying to prove him wrong, it makes me think of other people that are always trying to and obviously I know your story a little bit. You and your parents and your dad are on great terms now, right? But how cool was it that, whether he knew it or you knew it or not, that's what kind of motivated you to kind of break that barrier and get into real estate. So that's your first deal. And not to fast forward too far, but what would have been, and I guess the tip that we can all take from this up to this point is you don't need to know what you're doing. Right? You just need to take action and be willing to figure it out and to fight and to struggle and to look stupid at times, right? And be willing to be curious and learn along the way. So that was the aha moment for you where you're like, oh man, 48 extra bucks a month, I'm living for free. This is golden. So then what is happening inside your head and what direction do you go next, after you kind of get that first one put to bed at the age of 19?
that was kind of the moment where I realized like life could be more than delivering pizza.
Yeah.
And so what I tried to do is, in my very prideful mindset, was think back to everything my dad had tried to teach me and try to do it secretly without telling him or asking him for help on how to do it correctly, right? So like, I actually still have it. I wrote my first business plan, which is something my dad was always trying to get me to do. So boring, didn't want to do it. And I wrote my first business plan, and man, it was so bad.
Yeah.
But so my first business plan was that I was going to buy this house, hold it for 30 years, rent it out, never raise rents ever, right? Just rent it out, let my tenant pay it off, and in 30 years sell it for what I bought it for, only it'll be paid off and I didn't pay a dime to it.
Right.
Like my first business plan didn't really account for cash flow. It didn't account for appreciation or anything. I just thought the most brilliant part about it was that I could buy something and somebody else would pay it off.
Right. Right.
And I guess that's not the worst strategy, but
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, that's the golden ticket and the golden idea, right? Like, how do you leverage so that someone else is paying down your assets, increasing your equity, and you maybe didn't understand all the intricacies of it, but just that basic premise, man, that's so much further ahead than most people, right? Most people are in that mindset of like, how much is rent? What can I afford the rent in this place? And you're thinking, actually, can all these people pay my rent for me? You know?
So you have to understand, this is 2015, right? So I buy it February of 2015. By June, they're telling me that it's worth $40,000 more than I bought it for. Right? I mean, This is just what's happening. And of course, the natural assumption is that it's as a result of me, not the market.
Right.
Like, I'm the genius here. Like, I did this.
Right, exactly.
So what did I do? I went out and bought not one, but two Mustangs. I had two Mustangs at the same time, and I still have no income.
Yeah.
It's just painful to talk about, honestly. And all of a sudden I buy you have to understand, I'm really not thinking about tomorrow. Like what I'm telling you is how my brain is actually developing. My brain's not even fully developed at this point in my life. Right. But the reason I'm being raw about this is because I want people to walk away from this and understand that if that Dakota could somehow develop to the point that he could get to the Dakota that I am today, that it really is possible for anybody. So I bought these two Mustangs literally without a way to pay for it. My payment on both of them is like $400 a month. So I've got like $700 and something a month I got to pay. So, and I can't work any more hours while I'm in school. I'm already tapping out. So I realized I have to buy another property. So I convinced them to get me some money and refinance out of my house, right? There's a super true version of the story, which I can't quite share because there are other people involved, but this is the mostly true story. Okay. I was able to pull money out of that house, cash out refinance, right? And take it and buy another triplex. Triplex was $155,000, tear down condition. Well, no, that's not true. I completely exaggerated that. But it's a crack house.
Yeah.
Like, it's awful. And my dad is a master craftsman, and my whole life, this man tried to teach me how to do carpentry, how to lay flooring, how to install trim, how to do roof work. And guess what I wanted to do? Don't tread on me. I'm playing World of Warcraft.
Right.
Leave me alone. You're oppressing me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now I'm looking at this remodel with no money to do it. And I'm slapping it together. And the craftsmanship is super poor. I'm YouTubing things. I don't have proper tools. I don't have the budget. I'm putting things places they don't belong, right? I'm using shopping bags for underlayment. I'm using peel and stick vinyl tiles for countertops. I'm slapping this together. The nice part is the building was so bad, it was still an improvement.
Yeah, right.
And it was like 6 to 8 months later, it came back valued at $60,000 more than I bought it for. And now I'm really thinking I'm important, right? And so this is kind of the constant tug of war between my ego and reality, where I would do really well because I would start listening to my dad.
Right.
Because getting kicked in the teeth hurts. But then I would do really well because I was listening to my dad, and I would take that reward and I would quickly forget that it was the result of listening to my dad and thinking that it was the result of me and I don't need to listen to him because look at what I'm doing over here. I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So the whole story's just been a tale of ego suspension. And,
but at least you're doing it in proven strategies of value add, using properties as a little bit of an ATM to get you into the next property, right? And I think the thing that people are starting to catch on if they don't talk to you a lot is that you are a good storyteller, you're very personable, and I think this goes hand in hand with one of your kind of super strengths is talking to people, negotiating with people, talking them in to believing in you. And that comes into play when you kind of went, way bigger than just the triplex and the single family home in taking down your first, what was your first one, a 14 or 20 unit apartment that was just super gnarly, right? You debated whether after the fact, whether it was going to kill you or not, but maybe lead into that one, how you progressed towards that first deal.
So you're talking about a 16 unit complex, and it almost put me into bankruptcy.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one. Yep.
So before I lead into this, right? So you learn as you grow up and you're wiser that there really are no clear-cut black and white answers to anything. Right? And there are some things that you need to take away from my story that are going to be good at certain times and detrimental at others. Right? Like if you want to know how a 19-year-old kid goes from Domino's delivery to literally being worth a net million by 21, right? It's because my attitude was literally do or die, and I wasn't afraid to die. I was willing to die on every single deal. And you have to understand, from growing up in my dad's world, I didn't know any millionaires who hadn't declared bankruptcy at least once.
Yeah.
And so I was, especially when I'm 19, I'm over here, they're telling me I can get a loan 4 years after bankruptcy. I'm thinking, okay, if I go bankrupt, I go travel for 4 years or finish my degree and I'm right back at it. And I'm still 10 years younger than the median time that somebody buys their first property.
Yeah.
Right. So that's important for the 16 plex. So you have to realize the reason I'm winning, I'm smacking home runs, half because of the market, but half because I'm going into the gutters that everybody else is passing on, because I'm not afraid to sink my entire fleet.
Right.
For one ship.
Right.
And this is the 16 plex is the story about how I almost sunk my fleet and my mindset changed, right? Because when you have one boat, you're not afraid to sink it. You know what I mean? Well, maybe you are if you're on it, maybe you're not. But you have 2 or 3, okay, if the payoff's still there, but if you stay in that mindset and you don't adjust, all of a sudden you get yourself into one boat and you look behind and there are 20 boats sinking behind you because you haven't changed your mentality. So I meet this guy in a grocery store and I just start talking to him, and I'm doing it specifically to piss my girlfriend off because she says I talk to everybody but her.
Yeah.
And I start talking to this guy and helping him around. He's this old guy. And he asks me what I do, and I tell him, and he says, well, why aren't you worth $5 million then? I said, because I don't have enough money. And he asked to come see this project I was looking at. And I showed him that 16-plex, and he wrote me an $830,000 check, like literally like 7 days later. No credit check, nothing, right?
To finance you?
Yeah, and that was $180,000 in rehab money too.
Wow.
100%. I didn't put a dime down, right? So take this egotistical Dakota that I've been telling you about and put $830,000 of cash in his pocket, right?
Yeah.
So the problem is not like necessarily resisting temptation. I didn't do anything that I shouldn't have done with that money at all, right? But what did happen is on a project where I desperately, again, needed to listen to my father, needed to consult my mentors, right? What do they know? I'm 20 years old now, 21 years old now, and I got almost $1 million, right?
So just the semantics of that, or the mechanics of it, like, did he put a lien on it to help you buy it, or did he just legitimately write you a check for you to then go buy the 16 units and cover your rehab?
It was like his first project ever, hard money project ever. So like we bought the property and then we settled the lien up like afterwards.
After.
So we were both kind of, I know. I see Dallas shaking his head at me. But yeah, that's what happened, right? So on this project, I started telling my dad, like, well, obviously I do know better than you.
Yeah, right. You're still battling with them. And just really quick, your dad was not like a florist, right? Like he didn't own a gift shop on the corner and where your dad's kind of hardcore, right? Like he's a little bit of an intimidating profession, isn't he?
Yeah, he is a very well-established businessman. At his height, he was worth 9 figures.
Yeah.
So solely just him. So I grew up with the best possible business mentor in the world.
Right.
Right, to have somebody who's that kind of patience, that kind of connections, that kind of experience, right? It's just my pride. I'm my own worst enemy. So like, for example, one of the first things that I did was it's Black Friday, and I know I need 16 of everything, 16 fridges, 16 stoves, 16 microwaves. And my dad's sitting there saying, no, Dakota, keep the money in the bank, right? You don't know what's going to happen. Money in the bank is worth more than inventory on a site, right? And I'm sitting here, I'm just seeing the bulk sales for Black Friday. So thinking I know better, I go blow a bunch of that money and I buy all of this shit, right? Like there's some people on this call who are actually around for this. Like I see Joe here on the call. He was actually like in my life around when this was happening. He can attest. I had half a huge parking lot full of timber, like everything I needed on the project, right?
Yeah.
So when that project went south because there were issues with the city, they were trying to take it eminent domain, they weren't giving me building permits, all this stuff, and I'm doing it for the first time, right? So it's not like I have the clout to throw weight around. I have all of this stuff rusting in a parking lot, people vandalizing or trying to steal it every night, and no money in the bank. And I've got an $8,300 a month hard money interest payment, right? And what's interesting, I did sell that building and get out of it pretty okay. But there was a point, like it was way later than it should have been, but there was a point where I sat down, I wrote the numbers down, and I realized I was going down.
Yeah.
That my burn rate was way too high. And I was looking down the barrel of the shotgun between payroll, interest payments, everything else, that I had like a month and a half before I was going to run out of money.
Right.
And that was the moment. That was like really a moment when I got really humble. And I kind of said, I looked back at all those ships that were about to sink.
Yeah.
So I had a decent portfolio at this point. And it was just kind of like, oh my God, what have I done?
Right.
And it wasn't a mistake I made. I was blatantly told not to do what I did. And, you know, I asked my dad for help. And my dad helped with the city. He helped with the city, and he told me he was helping with the city because he thought what they were doing was wrong and corrupt. He actually pulled some really high-level connections to get me my permit. There was some news articles written about it, all sorts of stuff. But he said, I'm not going to bail you out of the financial side. He's like, you want to be a businessman? You want to be an adult? You want to be an entrepreneur? This is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, you talked us into this at 16, Dakota. Go for it, bro.
No, literally, he's like, nobody did this to you. And so my dad told me in no uncertain words that, you know what, my fleet was going to sink and I shouldn't feel bad about it. I should just be prepared to work twice as hard to build those ships again.
Yeah, cool. I love it.
And somebody, I actually ended up surviving, by pretty much a testament to Lisa, right? Most of you guys know Lisa, who waived her commission, represented both sides, charged no commissions, worked probably 200 hours on it without pay just to sell that building and get me out of it.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you're obviously still very connected with Lisa now. She's your property manager and on all your deals, right? So quick plug for Lisa because she's a great person.
Oh, she's more than that. I mean, I tell Lisa, I can't wait for the day that I pay her $1 million a year to run. She's the CEO of DW Investors.
Yeah.
Flat out, that's what she is.
It's awesome.
So here's the good part about all that. When I survived, and this is 1/3 Lisa, 1/3 a crazy market, 1/3 I just had a radical personality change, right? Because I survived, these mistakes that I made would have bankrupted any other investor at any other time, right? The market appreciating at 10% a month, I'm not even making this up, at this time, right, is saving me.
Right.
Big. So my big catalyst, my velocity moment was when I got to survive and actually even profit a little bit on a property that should have bankrupted me. And I got to take all of that information essentially for free that most investors have to pay for and roll it into my next property.
Yeah.
And after all of that lessons, that year-long, you can't pay for education that I got on that project, right? And being able to take that to my other projects, I've done projects now 3 times as large as that, smooth as butter.
Right.
More efficient than anybody I know, cheaper than anybody I know. Get the city on my side ahead of time. I've got my due diligence done, right? Negotiating them better. And that was the critical velocity. That was critical mass, right? Not dying on that project.
Right. And you bring up a good point, though, which I think you're getting to as you progress is, you were willing to start over, and there is a time and a place to just swing for the fences. You're probably not swinging as hard for the fences today as you were willing to at age 19, 20, 21, because that fleet and that momentum means a little bit more to you, right? So this is a great transition to kind of understanding a little bit about and you said it there, and I think that is so cool. Like, if Lisa can get to be being paid $1 million for, being your CEO, and that's the ultimate mindset of, I think, of a true entrepreneur. How can I raise the level, the standard of living, the growth of those around me? Because obviously that's just you're going to grow with it, right? But where does your passion from being a mentor come in? And if it's okay, I kind of want to talk a little bit about, because you're probably the youngest president of Slaria, right? Like, you're just a go-getter, you're a leader. But where does that come from? Why are you motivated to help others? And then how did you set up the platform of what you're doing now with DW Investors?
So honestly, it just comes from a deep place of gratitude, especially in today where everybody's talking about privilege, right? And I'm not going to get political, but I've thought a lot about that, and I've thought about where I think my privilege lies. And for me, it comes, without a doubt, it comes down to my parents. Like, there's no aspect of my life that I'm happy about, that I'm successful in, that I can't say I could have accomplished without my parents. And if I could have accomplished it, not by 25.
Yeah.
And I think about, even as I'm mentoring people now and they get on my nerves and I get curt or I get short or something, I think about all the things I did and how my dad was always literally just the perfect mentor for me. Hard when he needed to be, never really needing to beat me up though. Never there with the I told you so, just patience of a saint. Yeah. Just being willing to always forgive, right? And give that information freely. That's where it comes from. When I can say that, there's kind of this weird effect that happens, right? Like, everybody looks at you now, Matt. Like, I'm sure you know this. Like, people look at you, Matt, they say, Matt is this powerhouse. He's this God among men. He's up here. Like, some people were made to be up there, right? And some people, like, I'm not like them. Some people are down here, right? And just realizing, like, people look at me that way sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And to know that the only reason I'm here, that I'm actually no different, that the only reason that I'm up here is because of these two people that by luck I was born to, that were the perfect people for me, that helped me get there. And then growing up and realizing through college that a lot of people don't have parents, or they have parents that are so supportive that it's toxic, or they have parents who are so non-supportive and cynical that it's toxic. Like, nobody has that perfect blend that I had. And when I realized that I couldn't say that my success was 100% my own, and I realized there is no such thing as a self-made millionaire, that's when I kind of, maybe through some guilt or gratitude, both, wanted to kind of teach other people.
Well, and also an extreme amount of humility and self-introspection, right? Realizing that there is a reason, right? That you got to where you are, and the way you're wired the way you are, and the way you're motivated the way you are. So I think it's so cool, and it's such a good example to be grateful for where you came from, no matter what, right? Like I'm grateful. I was the opposite, where like very privileged, had everything I ever wanted. I just think, I'm sure other people are on the call just going, okay, talking your parents into legally emancipate yourself when you're 16, right? Like, that is just such an interesting dynamic between parents and kids. Like, I think it's so cool. I wish Instagram would have been around back then when you were 16 to document like your adventures. But no, I think that's great. And how have you seen, let's talk about this a little bit more to kind of end the call, because I think, I think it's resonating with a lot of people. How do you see that exchange of like giving, providing value, mentoring other people? How does that in turn help you? Because I think a lot of times people, I don't think you do it out of selfish reasons, but I think what you throw out there does come back to you. How have you seen that happen as you just naturally, from good intentions, like you just said, wanting to help, wanting to give back, wanting to mentor other people that maybe didn't have the advantages that you had and the opportunities? How does that cycle kind of work to, I'm guessing, kind of keep motivating you and kind of jazz you up to keep doing it?
Mentorship's hard, and there's really not a lot of people talking about it. So mentorship for me, the reason I keep doing it, why I started and why I do it now are different. It kind of helps keep me grounded a lot. Like, at some point you wake up and realize that you've made it to a point where you just live in a different world than everybody else does. Mm-hmm. Like, the people you interact with are different. The areas you live in are different. Your problems are different. The way you spend your time is different. And coming back down to earth to spend time with these people who are in a phase that I haven't been in 6 years or 7 years, right? It kind of helps keep me grounded a little bit. But there have been positives and negatives, right? One of the positives, a lot of times I'll help people buy their first multi, right? But it's a long time before they have the money to buy the second. And a lot of times they'll find a property in between now and then, and who are they going to bring it to?
Right.
Of course they're going to bring it to me. And you compensate it for it, but that's one benefit, right? But there are some of the negatives. I've trained a lot of people, brought them into my markets, teach them exactly how to do what I do, only to have them steal the exact deal that I was showing them examples of as I'm trying to buy it, right? I mean, to date, I can tell you exactly, I've lost $1.8 million to mentorship. But how much money would I lose if I kind of let this other half of Dakota, this pride, kind of get out of control because I'm not being grounded by being forced to reminisce about these lessons I've already learned.
Yeah.
So I almost see it as self-preservation.
Yeah. Well, you probably learn a lot, obviously, from doing it. And I know you've created, if you guys haven't checked out, just a plug for Dakota's website and program, take a minute. It's in the chat. Go browse through dw-education.com. And the other thing, Dakota, that I think is very telling of where you've been at, where you're at, and where you're going. is, we started talking a lot more about a lot of stuff. I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, right? And we've done we've done a deal together where, it was a borrower-lender relationship. But throughout that, we got to talking a lot. And one thing that I think is a huge takeaway that I've learned from you, because I tend to be a little bit prideful and not willing to, maybe find those answers from someone else. I've kind of, a lot of times just been like, well, I'll figure it out. I'm smart enough. I don't need to ask. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Who cares, right? Like, I'll figure it out. But there's been so many times where you've called me or whatever and said, hey, I just want to know, did I do that the way you were hoping I would do it? Or is there a way I could have done it different? Or, just tell me if I'm not following your process the right way or whatever. So you've shown a lot of curiosity, which I think is my main takeaway from my relationship with you and my call today is how can I be more curious? And then also, how can I give back more? And I think you just ask a lot of good questions, but you're also very, very confident, right? And so I think that helps a ton within your mentorship with others, is helping them be curious about what they're doing, even if they don't naturally know how to be curious themselves, right? You wouldn't be where you're at if you didn't have an extreme amount of curiosity about how the world works, how money works, how multifamily works, so on and so forth.
Well, Matt, it's interesting. Like, I don't consider myself to be a real estate investor.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, I'm way closer to China, where I'm just a thief of intellectual property, in the sense that one day I had this wake up call with that 16plex where I realized, yes, even statistically, I'm way smarter than most people are, right?
Yeah.
And then realizing that there are people way smarter than me who are still broke, who are still poor, who are still miserable, and realizing intelligence is not one bit a factor in success. And I know that's an extreme statement to make, but I realize that intelligence is almost more harmful than helpful if that's all you have. Mm-hmm. Wisdom is pound for pound way more valuable to making money, to being happy, right? To actually doing anything than intelligence is. And as soon as I realized that the easiest way for me to be happy, to get where I want to go, to be successful, was to stop being such an asshole and to start just asking people. Like, if I say, oh, I want to buy a building, instead of barreling through those walls head first, if I just stopped and say, hey, Matt, there's this house I'm looking at buying. What do you think about that? And then actually just following that advice, realizing that the only use for my intelligence, the only decision that I need to make individually, and albeit the most important decision, is who I'm going to ask for that advice from.
Yeah.
And then knowing that I'm going to follow it, that's what's made me a multimillionaire.
Dude, that right there is the whole call, and you said it so well. Ray Dalio, if you guys don't watch or listen to some of his stuff, he has an amazing book called Principles, and he talks about this concept, your exact concept. When you're searching for advice, ask and seek advice from the most believable person, not that the most truthful person, but the most credible, believable person for the problem you're trying to solve that's already solved that problem, right? And be humble enough to accept their advice. And then, you made it sound so simple, right? And then just do what they tell you you're going to do, right? And follow the script and get over yourself and learn along the way. That is so powerful.
So I know you told me you wanted me to come up with one action item, one major takeaway.
Yeah.
And this is what I think I would end on for the takeaway, because I thought a lot about this. There's a lot of stuff, and this is one thing I think not a lot of people are talking about. So right now I'm not using a virtual background, right? Because I wanted you guys to see. I am still to this day, I think with 30% expenses, paying my taxes, right now passively on my passive income, I think I'm clearing about $28,000 a month. By December, I expect to be at $40,000, right? Net. But I'm not driving the 2020 Corvette that I want, right? I'm not living in a really nice house. I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment. And here's why that's important. You've heard this before. Everybody has told you live below your means, but here's what people aren't connecting. When I was competing in the same markets, which are very cutthroat, as people like Matt and Randall and Luke Watkins, back when he was a big player at that time, right, in this area, things like that. How was, and no offense, Matt, at all, I was beating you guys, and I was beating you bad because I wasn't doing mass amounts of deals. See, this is the ego, Dakota. See, bring it back. Okay.
Right.
Over here. Look, how do you run against people with more experience than you, more money, better connections, right? Let's say when I was just getting started in the same market, I was only clearing $4,000 a month, right? Let's say for easy math, like Matt, Randall, Luke Watkins, somebody was clearing $10,000 a month. We were really making the same amount of money because you guys know this to be true from Facebook. What do you see people do when they first make a bit of money? They go buy the Ford Raptor. They buy the Tesla. Right? I was making $4,000 a month, but I was living off $1,000.
Yeah.
They're making $10,000 a month, but they were spending $7,000 on their mortgage, on their car, on everything. Even now, how things work, how I'm growing so quickly is because Hannah and I, two people, and we live comfortably. We're living off only $3,021 a month.
Yeah.
That's what we live off. We haven't raised our standard of living to meet our income. And we will eventually, but not yet, because that's how we're staying competitive. If somebody's out there making $100,000 a month, but they're constantly traveling, they're constantly in the Maldives, like they have a Lamborghini. You guys know this type of person, right?
Yep.
They're not making more money than I am.
No, you're exactly right.
And living cheap like this is my superpower. This is my competitive advantage that I have over everybody else on this call, is that I live cheap, and 100% of my income goes back to reinvesting in this business, dealing with unforeseen circumstances, dealing with the lawsuit, dealing whatever comes out of left field that I'm not prepared for, right? And every single month, right, you have to understand, I've got enough where every month I have enough for a down payment on a single family house now.
Right.
And how do you hit critical mass? Everybody thinks it's to make more money. It's not. It's good defense.
Right.
And you know, again, that's a tribute to my father, because it's not that I never wanted to go. In fact, I have screamed and yelled at my dad, even recently, about him telling me I can't have these nice things I want.
Right.
And I'm so grateful for it, because you realize a month passes and that urge is gone now, and you don't care, and you're happy that you still have that money in your pocket.
Right.
So live below your means, and that will bridge the gap to your competition.
I love it. That's not advice a lot of people want to hear, though, right? Like that sounds a lot harder than and I struggle through that, right? As you go on and you get kids and a lifestyle, right? Sometimes it's hard to adjust, but maybe that's just a limiting belief. I know there's people on this call that are maybe, you know, decades ahead of you as far as just age in life, and are wanting to get to where you are now. Now, this might be a really, really hard question to answer, because you haven't walked in their shoes. You haven't, you know, been where they're at with maybe an established family, maybe multiple careers over the years. But if you could think of one step that someone could make that's trying to get into their first deal, that maybe has other, like, and you maybe, I think, have already answered it, but maybe to end the call, and again, your one takeaway, I think, is so valuable. So thank you for sharing. Like, live below your means, you know, scrap, save, you know, be happy with where you're at. You don't need a lot of material things to be happy with where you're at, and have your plan, right? I know your plan because I've talked to you. Your plan is very specific about where you're going, where you're headed, and what you want to do, right? So one, I can't wait to follow along your journey. And a little bit of a soapbox now before we run out of time, and you end with the last word. But for those also that aren't involved in the RIAs, and if you're new and young and wanting to learn more, get the education you need from, again, people that have been there. So Dakota and everybody else on the board is doing a phenomenal job with SLRIA, and you know, I'm big proponent of that. Also, there's other RIAs out there. Get involved with all of them, right? And if you need some specialized training, check out Dakota's courses. There's other courses too that will help you kind of get ahead of the line And it doesn't matter how old you are or where you're at or how many deals you've done or not done. Like, there's a way to get better, and there's a way to be inspired by other people. So maybe to kind of end, Dakota, because we could go for 5 hours with you and it would be just dynamite. I know it. So I feel a little bit bad cutting you short here, but I like to stick to just the hour, right? Everyone's got stuff to do. So wrap us up here with maybe how you would see it, no matter where you're at. Like, what's one step someone can do today to get going into their first $48 plus net cash flow and really get them excited that there is a future in real estate?
You're right. This is a hard one. It was a big advantage not having kids. And a lot of people I talk to have families and they can't do or die, or they feel that they can't do or die. Problem is cash flow is the king, right? But passive income is a really slow game before it snowballs.
Yep.
And I think the reality is even for people who feel like they can't take that risk, they have to, because they don't have as much time as I do. They're going to have to take a risk. So that being said, knowing what I know and thinking about kind of what I think is going to happen in the market, one thing that I'm looking at is looking at markets that I think are going to do good tomorrow and buying options in those markets. Right? Like, that's how I'm hedging my bets right now. So I'm pretty sure the economy is going to do okay, right? I'm pretty sure the Fed is going to hold up on their promise not to raise rates through 2023, right? But I also have this big question mark about the election and how it's going to affect consumer confidence. And so one of the things that I'm doing is I'm looking at buildings that I kind of plan on buying anyways, and I'm buying options on them today. So if things stay the same, then it's not really any money out of my pocket, so I'm going to get my option money back when I buy it, right? That's the way I've structured it, almost like earnest money.
Yeah.
But if things go bad and they drop, I'm going to be the first person out of all the other investors who are set up to go compete with me who has the option to buy that property when things are dropped. So that's how I'm hedging my bet. I would think if there's a property that anybody on this call is looking at that they want to buy, but they've got this question mark or this reservation, I'd be talking to them about trying to get an option on it.
Cool. I love it. And so there's so much more to that. That's why there's a great chance to go learn it. So if you don't know what that is, go out and Google it, learn it, and figure it out. That's one great action step. It's going to spark an idea, something that you can turn into gold. So Dakota, to end the call, I just got to say I really appreciate you. You've been so kind to me. You've looked at me as an equal, and hopefully you felt that for me. And I can't wait to keep watching hopefully with a front row seat to where DW Investors heads, to where your portfolio goes. But more importantly, the effect that you're having on other people. I mean, you and I were on a call with a young guy yesterday that's looking to buy his first duplex, and it's just cool to see how you can motivate and inspire people to get in the spot that they want to be, and aspire to be a little bit like you. So not to pump up your ego too much, but you do need that. We need the Dakotas in the world to inspire and lead. So I appreciate you jumping on this call, man. You're a rock star, and thanks everyone else for jumping on. If you want to reach out to Dakota, how do you recommend people reach out to you, or get it hit through your website, or you want to throw in the chat your preferred method?
Sure, I'll just drop my contact information in the chat bar, and people can reach out to me if they'd like to.
Awesome. Okay, buddy. Well, have a great day up there and enjoy that one bedroom, and keep growing your empire, buddy.
Have a good day, Matt. Thank you for having me on the call.
Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.